I'm the author of this incredible common sentience book, Guides, Mystical Connections to Soul Guides and Divine Teachers. And I really believe that our guides are here to help us live a very co-creative, incredible life, a life that is full of synchronicity, full of magic. And it really is, our guides help us to bring our dreams that are in our heart out into the world. And in the beginning of this book, I talk about relationship with guides and what guides are. And it really helps you to understand that guides can be anything. But I think what's even more powerful than that is to hear other people's stories, because many times you may have had experiences with guides, but you may have not recognized that that's what was happening. And when you hear somebody else's story, you're like, oh my goodness, that happened to me. So I am going to introduce you to SARYON. Hi, SARYON. Thank you so much
Hi.
for writing a story in the book.
Yeah, thank you for including it. I'm so excited to be a part of such a beautiful collaboration with all of these people.
So give us a little piece of your story about your guide.
Yeah, well, this particular encounter was the first time that I had connected with Yogananda.
Mm.
I have had friends that have worked with them. In fact, a number of my friends considered themselves to be disciples of Yogananda. So I'd heard stories and I had never really read any of his books, absolutely nothing. And then he just came to me. I was so surprised. And he asked me if I would read his book, Autobiography of a Yogi. And that was the beginning of a new relationship with him as one of my guides.
You also said something else in your story that I was found so profound. You talked about the imperfections.
Well, I was so excited that I could contribute that story to the book because it is so relatable and relevant. I mean, how many of us have had experiences where we would dwell on our imperfections? I mean, that's virtually everybody. We
Mhm.
all have regrets and we have hard time resolving things. And he just cleared that up, just cut through it like a knife and cut the cords, and it was gone. And he said that our imperfections are really just tests of self-love.
So next one we're going to talk to is Susan. And Susan, I'd love to hear from you right now. If you could share a tiny bit of your story, because your story moved me so much, because so many people understand what it's like to have incredible difficulties making a very challenging decision. And how can we be guided through that challenging decision to know that what we're doing is the right thing?
You know, after 25 years of marriage and not being happy and knowing that a change needed to happen and going through the process, things showed up, but then coming and having to sign on that dotted line of actually a move to get out of my home to a new apartment was just undaunting to me. So as I'm walking the street, I said to the universe, yeah, I need a sign. You have to give me a sign knowing that I'm moving in the direction I'm supposed to move to. And, you know, it's always fascinating to me. Always amazing, never surprising, I guess, that when you ask, the sign shows up in the most unusual ways. Who would have thought walking into a coffee shop, having a conversation, then introducing myself to the owner of the coffee shop and her name being Faith.
Mhm.
It took all of my energy to not fall on the floor at that point, to
Yeah.
just totally give that up and say, okay, got it. I can do this.
How did your communication with guides help you move forward from that moment on? Like, did you continue to communicate? Was that like the big door was open and now you're like, now I trust this even more?
Definitely. It has in any decision that I've made. I've actually, I call it, I've given up my conductor wands and literally given it to the universe and said, okay, if I'm to go here, show me the way. And they have not let me down. And I have moved. I've had experiences that I would never have had if I did not have the trust in my guides.
What would you say to somebody who's interested in communicating with their guides, who's new to this work? What would be something that you would suggest to them to do in order to, besides buying the book, what they could do to really start engaging that muscle inside of themselves or that belief?
When a small decision, maybe less impactful decision comes, to ask them for the guidance and for them to allow their heart and their mind to be open to receiving whatever shows up, and to have no expectation as to how it's going to show up. Things that have happened in my life, like the coffee shop, not in a million years would I have come up with that.
Right. But
So
you were
it's
open to it, so you were able to see it, which is a big part. That's great.
It's being open for sure.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for contributing your story. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to hear from someone else. And this is going to be Sandra Paley. Can you tell a little bit about your story to everyone?
For sure. This guide is absolutely amazing. And when she came into my life, I really had no idea who she was. It was only in future self-healing and doing healing work on myself and others that I discovered that she was actually more known than just to me. So I love that I was able to share her with so many others as well. And it really began with this feeling in my hands. And that feeling in my hands progressed to the point where it was pain. And then I was doing a session or doing a process with somebody on the healing table in my sacred space. And I had my eyes closed because I see in the dark. I work way better when I have my eyes closed. And as I had my hands over this person, working on them with the energy, I could see with my eyes closed this bright light, and it was the shape of my arm. And I opened my eyes and I looked at my arm, and it was like, okay, what's going on? And it was just absolutely fascinating. So long story short, it ended up being the overlighting diva of healing. And she's so magical, and she walks with me everywhere I go. And she is the one who is activating my hands and guiding me even further on my journey, both with understanding other people, understanding the traumatic events that might be going on in them, physical pain that they might have going on, all kinds of things. It's just a beautiful, beautiful transaction.
And as I understand it, say the name again of your guide, the guide.
The overlighting diva of healing.
And that was a name that came to you, right? It's not something you can Google. It's like, this is a guide that showed up for you, right?
Well, in essence, yes, it showed up. She showed up for me. And then I discovered her in another book. And once I discovered her in the other book, that's when I realized, oh, well, maybe she's a little bit more known. So she showed up for me. And at that time, I had no idea who she was. No, not at all. No.
What would be something, Sandra, that you would share with people to help them to believe in themselves, that a guide of that magnitude would want to work with them, and how they could open up to receiving that kind of love and that kind of, work?
What a beautiful question. What I would tell people about understanding the value of themselves and the magnitude, the power of the guide that's coming through that wants to work with them, it's because they see your value and they're asking you to step into that value as well. And that, when you start to understand that, you start to begin to believe in yourself, and your confidence grows in really big ways. And it just kind of ripple effect from there. It just rolls until you're in this state of being where you're at peace. You're so much more calmer, and you feel like you have a mission or a vision. You feel more capable. And as I said before, very much more confident.
So we're going to talk to another author, but there's a couple of things that you've heard so far that I just want to highlight, that anybody can work with a guide. And I really hope that you embrace that inside yourself, and you recognize, I remember that moment when my guides chose me, and I felt so humbled by it. And guides are for everyone. And that's what we talk about in the book, how everybody can have a guide, and it could be a color, it could be music, it could be a planet. So I really I'm hoping these stories are encouraging you to believe, because the biggest thing to get that connection is just wanting to meet them. Just the desire to meet them opens the door and sets the intention, and then paying attention to the things that are happening around you. Like Sandra was doing work and feeling her hands, the physical sensation in her hands, which you may be feeling, and then just allowing that and using your imagination and accepting it. And that's going to help you to open up your relationship with your guides. So we're going to hear now from SEANA.
So for me, I have when Green Tara is the guy that showed up for me in the story that I relayed. And she came to me shortly after my mom passed when I was 19. And she came to me by virtue of her mantra, which is Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha. And it was somehow landed in my lap as a 19-year-old. And when I heard it, it instantly was a calming experience. So I began to associate the magic of Tara, Green Tara, with the energy of the mother. And because it was in support of my grief. So it was a really automatic call when I was delivering my first child, my only child, in a period of time where his heart rate dropped and I was about to be rolled away to a C-section. And what happened was I just instantly said her mantra and called her in, and it was like she enveloped me. And it was this very primal sort of a very incredible experience of women supporting other women, because I just leaned back and it was like she had me and she was supporting me from behind. And it was when I felt that experience, I immediately knew that I wasn't going to go through a C-section and that my son would be healthy. And her energy it transformed me immediately, but I also had been working with her for a while. And so we already had this established relationship, which is, Marilyn, why it moved me when you described that when we set that intention. I felt her arrive in my reality during a time where I really needed the energy of the divine feminine. And she set me on my path to realize that that's a big part of what my purpose is here. Like, I feel very connected to resurrecting that energy, to be, balanced with the divine masculine. And so I just credit Green Tara with so much, including this beautiful midwifing of my son's birth, which felt just perfect, like she stood in a beautiful way.
Do you still work with her today?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
And how do you work with her? Because let me ask this question, because it's important and it's talked about in the book. Has your relationship with her developed and grown?
Absolutely.
You want to talk a tiny bit about that?
Sure. Well, I felt like I was in training with her as a younger person. And at a certain point I transitioned, and she was very influential, in part because she was there with me with my son's birth. It was really after my son's birth that I transitioned from doing straight up traditional psychotherapy to doing intuitive readings. And so I work with her all the time. She's present. She's a protective energy that comes in. And I always feel like even that beautiful mantra is a way for me to be enveloped in a sacred boundary, when I'm doing the work. So she's a powerful being. And what's beautiful about her story is that she was offered the opportunity to come back and incarnate as a male master. And she was like, are you kidding? Absolutely not. I'm always incarnating as a woman. And I just love that energy of that relationship to, we're going to lift up the divine feminine. It needs to be restored to balance. So I feel like it is my hope to be able to support that process.
So what would you say to people who are experiencing an incredible amount of grief, to lose your mom at 19 years old? And after your experience of moving into mantra and this goddess, what would be something you would offer up to somebody who may be in a similar experience right now, who really needs to feel their guide?
Just exactly what you said before we began speaking here, is around setting the intention and really just having faith in yourself, that aligning your free will with the desire to connect with the higher realms makes it so. And it's literally just a decision, and then being open to how it shows up. And it shows up in all these different ways, as you so beautifully wrote in throughout the book. And it can come in as numbers, it can come in all these different ways. But the idea is just saying, I'm ready, and it comes.
I love that. Thank you so much, Shauna. And thank you for your beautiful story and your beautiful work. I really appreciate it. So we're going to hear from one author, but I want to say something that Shauna said that I want to offer up to all of you. I talk a lot about breath in the book, and how breath works like an umbilical cords to your guides, and how you can breathe with your guides and really feel them. And what I love Shauna shared was mantra, and I do some mantra work too. And mantra to me is another way of working with creating a line of energy from you to your guide, because it brings your inner awareness into engagement, and it allows you to engage that energy, a very magical energy that can transcend time and space, and to connect with your guide. So if you don't know how to start and you're like, I don't know, you can do it by breathing, or you can pick a mantra that you love, listen to YouTube and pronounce it the way they teach you, because it's okay if you butcher it up, I think, I don't know. And then say a mantra to a particular guide. And I feel you will feel the presence of the energy, just like Shauna shared in her beautiful story. Okay, the next person is Andrea. So I'd love for you to share a bit about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 2 young kids. I wrote this story, when I wrote the story, my kids were 3 and 5. And so they consume a lot of my life. And also when I wrote the story, I'd really only been into guides for about a year. It was just over a year prior to that I started to get this sense of, I want to understand who my guides are. I want to be able to talk to them for myself. I don't want to be paying psychics every time I want to connect with my guides. And so I was very new to this work when I wrote the story, which I think is helpful for people to know. And so as I was working my way through guides, one of the things I was challenged with was, who do I talk to? There's, it could be a color, a number, an animal, and am I speaking with my main guide, or what is it? And so finally, through my kids, who are, as I mentioned, they take up a lot of my time, and they're who I pay very close attention to. Through my kids it became my higher self and my inner child that ended up sort of coming and getting my attention through my children. And I probably don't talk to my inner little girl as much as I should, but my higher self is a relationship that I've really been cultivating since this came through. Since this moment came through with my son. So through an experience with my son, I was led to work with your higher self. Your higher self wants to be the main person, so I could have some focus in connecting with a main energy at the time.
You say a very powerful thing that I feel like a lot of parents, moms and dads need to hear when you were in the car and you had that download of that experience. I'd love for you to share that little snippet, because I feel that that's going to help a lot of parents who struggle with being a good parent or leaving a child when they're crying in school or whatever's happening. So if you could just share that, it was such beautiful advice, so profound.
Yeah, and I started tearing up a little bit as you were talking about it. So my son, I had left him at daycare and he was crying and it was breaking my heart. And what I've learned is to reflect a lot of my life back to something within me. And so as I was reflecting on, man, it breaks my heart every time he gets upset when I leave him, I got this download that there was a part of me that was also upset when an adult didn't reach out to her in her moment of need. And so that was a moment of my little girl coming through to me, and me paralleling what was going on with my son with maybe a moment or a period of my life when I reached out to someone and I didn't get what I was looking for. And then I took that a step further, and that's when I realized not only was my little girl looking for some support from me, from the adult that I am now, but the adult in me needed support from my higher self. And so it was sort of like it felt very generational. My higher self wanted to parent the adult that I am, and the adult that I am right now wanted to parent the little girl that I had.
So Andrea, what would you say to a parent or to someone who wants to get in touch with their higher self? What would be one thing that they can do in the higher to get in touch with their higher self?
For me, it started with just setting the intention. I'd like to connect with my higher self. And then it was even just understanding yes or no. How does yes or no feel in my body? And so I would just start with, show me a yes. And then I would understand how yes felt in my body. And then show me a no. And then I would tap into, how does no feel in my body? And then I would just start with simple questions, simple guidance, tap into the yes and the no, and just make it easy. And then as you trust and learn to follow, then you can start with more and more after that.
I love that answer. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Yeah.
for, yeah. So I just want to say something. So this is Common Sentience Guides. And what I love what we just experienced here with Andrea and SARYON and Shauna and Susan and Sandra. What I also love about that, these are people that do this work out in the world or are getting ready to do this work out in the world. And what I love about this Common Sentience series is that you're getting introduced to tons of people that are doing a lot of great in this world. And they are guides, they are teachers, and they are helping you to really grow in yourself, evolve, become who you really truly want to be and who spirit has meant you to be. So whether it's the guides book or another Common Sentience book, I have to say that what Sacred Stories is creating here is a movement. And it's something that to me is very grounded and it's very beautiful and it's very needed and it's very practical. And there's practical guidance in all these books so that you don't feel alone. And you can read this book and feel like there is finally somebody there with you on this journey and you can relate to other people's stories. And I encourage you to pick up all the books, not only my book guides, and I encourage you to also get to know the other authors because they are sharing. I know some of these authors and we just met this beautiful panel and these people really care about the welfare of other people. It is the most important thing for them. And it's the most important thing for Sacred Stories too, that we as a people live the best possible life that we can. So I want to thank you so much for joining me and I get the book. And thank you to all the authors. Man, you made this so magical and beautiful. So thank you so much. I love you all. Thank you. And thank you, Sacred Stories. Thank you.